Let's go now. A little life out here. What the hell's going on out here? Hey, what about that now?
Hello everybody, welcome to the UK Packers podcast. As usual, I'm your host, that's Steve Diddy NFL on Twitter, and of course follow the group at UK Packers. This is immediately after the game, so I don't have time to sugarcoat stuff and have perspective and all that, so I'm going to try cast my mind forward to think of how I would think of this game had I had, a second watch and stuff like that. And I've come to the conclusion that it'd still be garbaggio. Just absolutely dreadful game. My God. And this the thing is that if you get into the habit of just moaning about everything all the time, when you have a seriously pee-poor game like this one and you come on and say the same stuff, you sort of can't see the wood from the trees. So with that being said, let's take a quick look at it. The Packers have lost one game this season. Based on certain reactions online, you would swear that they were losing loads of games and it was against the Browns and all that kind of stuff, right? And someone equated this to that game and said, oh, it's like the Browns all over again. Unfortunately, it isn't. It's worse. And I would give the Packers a bit of a pass against the Browns game. Yes, it didn't fire on all cylinders, but the defense were great and, all that kind of stuff. And they came up against the number one defense in the NFL. So I could understand why they stuttered and all that. This was just a very bad performance by the Packers on offense. In fact, it was a bad performance by the Packers on defense also. With some real brain fart moment stuff. I just want to pause as well and say that this is not going to be sugar-coated either because of a really bad sinus infection, so the right side of my face feels like it's falling off. So if I sound a bit strange or if I sound a bit whatever, let's blame that. But look, this is one of the games, and this is where I think for me it's important to me to call it how I see it. And I know I'm going to call you up by name, Gary Brackey, right? I know you got on sort of jokingly and said, Steve, don't try sugarcoat this performance, it was terrible. Don't give us one of those pods where you try pretend everything's okay. In fairness, right, I don't try to be devil's advocate deliberately and sort of go on, look, oh, well, this is actually not that bad and be a homer for the team. I like to pick out the parts how I see it without looking at anybody else, and this is a perfect example of that because I'm straight on after the game. And this was poor, and it was poor because the Packers were getting into the red zone all the time. Again, not to annoy anybody, but the positive side of things is that we're getting into the red zone. The absolutely poor side of things is that we just couldn't convert. It was horrendous. The first offensive drive, we get down, we do really well, in fact, and then Savion Williams fumbles the ball and just a manky turnaround against the run of play game. At that stage, I wasn't too concerned. The second offensive drive, it was a great Watson catch, scuppered by an absolute manky bad series of plays and play calls at the very end between, Jordan Love getting sacked and then players dropping the ball and then was that the one, I'll scroll down through my notes here, was that the one where they went for a screen pass on 3rd and forever? Yeah, 3rd and 24. The screen pass was bobbled and dropped by Wilson. So, again, no sort of dogging Wilson over it. But to go for a screen pass there, and I know someone, and I put it out on social media like that was just a nonsense call. Now again, I understand, right? LaFleur makes the calls. I don't know if his first one was to Jordan Love to say throw the screen to Wilson, please. I doubt it, but it was the way the play set up. 3rd and 24 though. I mean, you're going to want to take a shot, and it didn't help that before that. So let's go. There was a Jacobs run, which brought up 2nd and 6, a fumble snap, which brought up 2nd and 11, and then a Jordan Love sack, which brought up 3rd and 19, and then Love uses his hard count, and it looks like the defense have jumped off sides, but it wasn't. It was Zach Tom, and then it's 3rd and 24. So again, that sort of, it was a long pass to Golden on that drive, a nice 8-yard run by Jacobs. So Jacobs gets a first down, another Jacobs run, and then that unbelievable Watson long catch for 51 yards on 3rd and 12. So again, it was a mixture of sort of pants and tasty, and it just ended in just a manky end. Now again, we ended up getting that 49-yard field goal in high wind. We go up 3-0, which is fine. But I'll just call out Dowdle on the off. And again, like I said, this is straight after the game, so I'm diving straight in without having my little stats neatly packed and compiled in notes. But Dowdle ran the faces off us. Now again, if you look at Josh Jacobs and you look at Dowdle, they had a very similar average per carry. I think Josh Jacobs was, let me bring it up, 5.1, and Dowdle was somewhere, what was he, 5.2. So, but 130 yards. And like I always say, let's go back to what we predicted in the preview and see if that rings true. What we did know was that this team were very unpredictable, right? Is that they put up massive points against certain teams. They shut out the Falcons and didn't let them score at all. And then they got blown out in that last game that they were in. And so we knew that they were kind of a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde team. But the Packers were 2 touchdown favourites on this team, and rightly so. And we should have put this to bed. Had we scored on the first offensive drive without that fumble, happy days. Had that second offensive drive not absolutely disintegrated based on penalties and sacks and bobble throws and bad play calls, we could have went up there because we're in the red zone again. And then on the third offensive drive, it was already the 2-minute warning, and we just kept running the ball, which is nonsensical, really. You think you take a couple of shots if they don't pan out. You keep the play clock and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, the narrative that was forming in my head as this game was going on, and we went in at the half 7-6, is that the Carolina Panthers played this game at the beginning extremely scared, right? Is that they won the toss, but they wanted the ball because they wanted to keep the ball away from this Green Bay offense because of the way we were playing the last while. And the offense only had the ball twice in the first half and then got it again for the third time with 2 minutes and 22 on the clock. So the narrative looked like it was similar to some of the other games that we've played this season where the Packers offense just didn't have time to score anything. But in this instance, we were down in the red zone on those 2 possessions, and 3 really, but on the first 2 we were in the red zone and we should have come away with some points or field. I know we got that field goal, and then of course McManus comes out and misses a field goal as well, and we lost by 3 points. And I know it's easy and it's low hanging fruit, and you look at what we lost by versus the points that we left out there on obvious sort of loss situations. And that miss by McManus was bad. Now again, it was a windy game, like you can't really hold that against him, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This game was god awful between, and then offensive penalties again and defensive penalties again. And we were brought up 3rd and goal, and McKinney came down with so on one drive, and this is an honourable mention because it's not all negative, McKinney comes away with a strip sack, and on the very next play gets that interception, which stops them from getting a field goal on 4th down, which was very valuable because it looked like it was going to be a low scoring game from the off then. And then it gets to 3rd and goal, and Keyshawn Nixon gets handsy again. So Keyshawn Nixon, very fond of the guy, but like I'll always say, he's always good for 1 or 2 unsportsmanlike conducts or brain fart penalties in every single game. And it just so happened that they were on 3rd and goal. McKinney almost comes down. It wouldn't have been ruled an interception anyway because his foot was out of bounds. But Nixon comes down with that defensive pass interference and gives them another shot, and Dowdle goes straight over. Of course he would. And then everyone got injured. Josh Jacobs was injured for a while. Aaron Banks went out and Ryan came in, and then Ryan committed a penalty or 2. On top of that, there was absolutely busted coverages and busted protection. So there was 2 instances that were clear cut of blown protection right up the middle, where Jenkins sort of slid one way and just left a free runner straight up the middle, which was nuts. And as I said, injuries, and we had Fitzpatrick out there playing Musgrave, and the Luke chant was going up. We'd Malik Heath out there who, again, there was I think it was a dump off to Wilson, and he didn't make the blocking assignment, and he got stuffed in the end zone, or in the backfield, I should say. So Malik Heath was sort of on and off, but to highlight, we were out there playing guys who hadn't really played a whole lot. Chris Brooks was catching passes by the end of it for a long of 16, 2 targets, 2 receptions, very important at the very end of the game. But Matthew Golden was out, shoulder injury. Tucker Kraft looks out, and again the early reports, and not to speak out of turn, but it looks like an MCL sprain at the least. Just one of those freak injuries. And like I said in the last game, the Packers are on a roll and they're doing great, but I did say about Tucker Kraft, it's good and bad with that yak stuff, because it means you're dumping the ball off early and depending on your players to make up the yardage, and we just didn't have that playmaker this time round. Now, Romeo Dobbs was absolutely outstanding on the night, 91 yards, 13 average. Christian Watson the long of 52. I think I called it 51 earlier in the podcast. They were going to him on deep shots. Luke Musgrave came in and did a commendable job. Tucker Kraft, had 20 yards on the game before he went out. Emmanuel Wilson was a bit of a hero on certain occasions, but again, he ended up on the game quite low, but he's a hard runner as usual. But just an awful game as well, not a sort of standard nice game from Jordan Love. There was some sort of stuff that rears its ugly head again with the, that interception, that pass into triple coverage was never ever on. And you want your quarterback to be exciting and take shots downfield, but that was not an occasion to do it. And, you're a hero if it comes off and you're a villain if it doesn't. And there was 2 occasions earlier in the game that he went long. Golden nearly came down with one of them and it didn't pan out. That was in double coverage. And then the one to Watson was in double coverage and he comes down with it and you go, oh wow, and it's an amazing throw, and it is. And then you see throws like that into triple coverage. It was underthrown. Watson didn't get back around to it and it just didn't pan out. So, and then, I'm focusing a lot on the offense, but on the defensive side of things, there was we just weren't generating pressure up front. If you look at Micah, and again, you can look at Micah Parsons and Rashan Gary, and by what their stat lines are, will tell you probably how the defense plays. Micah Parsons had 3 total tackles, I believe 0 quarterback pressures, and one of them was a solo tackle and one of them was a tackle for a loss. And then Rashan Gary had 3 total tackles, none on his own. They were all group tackles. So that'll tell you. Now, Xavier McKinney shined, I thought. He did really well. But again, some of the lads got caught out that didn't get caught out before. Javon Bullard gave away a penalty on special teams. And then on the next play or two, when he was out on defense, it was just bad all round. From scoring perspective, from getting into the red zone, for penalties, for play calling was god awful at times. McManus missing another field goal. Dowdle absolutely gouging us, and especially doing it in the most important part of the game. If we just go to that very last possession, it was just the way they got up was awful. And again, I can't criticise Matt LaFleur for making the decision not to call a timeout and try keep time on the clock and test their kicker, because he had missed one himself earlier in the game, that PAT. But again, massive first downs. Williams on the coverage, Valentine on the coverage. Macmillan at times looked like he wasn't covered at all. There was other times Macmillan got the ball when Valentine had tight coverage on him, so it just looked like a good play. But yes, there's no beating around the bush with this. The Panthers did not have a dynamite defense that shut down our offense. We basically smacked ourselves around the place in this game, and then our defense just gave up enough. But again, you're losing a game when you let them score 16 points. In credit to the defense, that should be enough, particularly when the Packers had scored 27 plus points in every single game, bar the one against the Browns. So, it's really nonsensical stuff. There's no excuse for it. And it is true. The Packers sometimes play down to bad teams and really step up for good teams. The only silver lining for us is that currently the Minnesota Vikings are beating the Detroit Lions. So that's good and bad again, right? Is that you look at that and you say, we had a chance to try extend the lead at the top of the division had we won. With Detroit, and again, Chicago are doing a great job against Cincy. They're up 41-27 as I speak. So we had a chance to maybe extend that at the top and, to win the game that we should win. And we're going into that game against the Eagles, which is going to be a real acid test. And maybe it's just a case of, all of these bad things coming together at the wrong time. Maybe it's a case of, again, and LaFleur is good for 1 or 2 of these every season, is looking at a bad opponent, looking past them to the next game. And I know he says take one game at a time, but this certainly looks like it was an occasion where they looked past the Panthers straight on to the Eagles and potentially just dropped the ball, for want of a better phrase. But look, like I said, I have an absolutely crippling sinus infection. And this game really didn't add to the enjoyment, which I'm sure it didn't for you. So we're just going to have to take a step away, do an Odell Beckham Jr. and punch a couple of holes in the walls here at home, and just chalk that one down for a loss. And hopefully that this isn't one of those type of games that comes back and bites us. at the end of the season or in the division, because we have a really tough opponent at home that will be over there on the group tour. I would love to be going off to the States to go and see the Badgers game, who are getting waxed, and going off to see the Packers game, who just got waxed in a better form. But look, it's like it always is, right? We look at games like this, we say, why do we shoot ourselves in the foot? And then the optimism starts to sort of creep back in again, unfortunately, against the Eagles on Monday Night Football. But if that's any solace, it gives us an extra day to try rest up. And then we'll be over in Green Bay having a whale of a time as well. So, a couple of shot skis and a couple of tailgating parties later, might take the sort of edge off in a little bit. But look, it is what it is. Follow the social media accounts at UK Packers, at STDD because we're going to be bringing loads of video and audio content when we go over. I hope to God we show up against the Eagles and really stick it to them, and we have the look of the Irish over there with us anyway. So look, it's almost quick snaps. I'm not going to do the snap. I'm not in the mood for it. I'm going to go and shove my face into a load of ibuprofen and antibiotics, and I hope you have a good week. We'll be back for the preview show. It might be a bit of a special one because we'll be all descending on London before we go to Green Bay. So I might get some punter opinions. Anyway, that's it. We can't win them all. I'm at Steady the NFL. We're at UK Packers. You're the sullen but fantastic audience that is the Green Bay Packers fans. Talk to you in a couple of days.